So I did a video laying out all the problems and faults I thought there were with Battlefield Hardline. In this video I'm going to show you the thing that they got right, and they got right in a big way, and that's the Heist game mode. Now we've only really played it on one map, and that's this one, Bank Job, but Heist on Bank Job is probably one of the most fun experiences I've had in a Battlefield game for a long time. I think the closest thing we've had recently was in Battlefield 3, and that was Gunmaster in the Close Quarters DLC. That mode was really good fun, though a bit pointless, and that's the thing that Heist manages. It's a good fun mode, but it's got tactical play in it. If you didn't get to play the beta, then this is a mode of two halves. At the start it's very similar to Rush. The cops have got to defend the bank vault and the criminals have got to attack it. The criminals are trying to get 2 loot bags safely to drop off points. The cops can win by running the criminals out of tickets. So in this initial phase the advantage is with the cops. They know where the criminals have got to go, but the criminals can't risk too many tickets in trying to get into the vault. If the criminals manage to grab the loot, then it turns into obliteration. Criminals have got to get those bags to 2 highlighted points. There are actually 3 drop-off points, but the game picks 2 at random, and if you fail on one of those points, then the game is going to switch the points round again. That shifts the focus of the round, so the cops have got to be pretty fluid in defence and need to split up. They need to cover the points, or they need to go ultra aggressive and push the bags and try and stop the carriers. The criminals, they've got to try and control these drop-off points, and then they've got to keep the man carrying the bag alive. It is a really good mode. Even though we only had one map to play it on, I didn't get bored of playing Heist. It's the mode I played the most on the beta. And I think it's down to the speed of the rounds. Heist is a very quick mode. Short games can be about 4 minutes, long games are about 10. And because it's a small map in a confined area, you're never very far away from the action. You just check your map, you can see where the loot is, you can see what the drop-off points are, and you can work with your team. Even with random players in squads, it's easy for a team to get organised because the objectives are very clear. If you have got organised squads, then this game steps up a level. Now I know Visceral are touting the rescue mode as their 5v5 competitive mode. Heist probably wouldn't be very good 5v5, but I think if you do this 10v10, it would be a really good competitive mode. It's fast paced, you've got obvious objectives, and in spectator mode you'd be able to see what the teams are doing, where they're laying traps, where they're pushing. Not necessarily on an individual level, but on a team level it would be a really good spectator event. So why have Visceral had more success with fast paced game modes than DICE have had? It's really down to the marketing of Battlefield as a large scale game. Battlefield is a 64 player game with armour and air vehicles in it. Visceral haven't had that restriction. They're not making Battlefield. Even though it's called Battlefield, it's obvious it's not Battlefield. So they've had the freedom to say 64 players, well, you can have Conquest, but the other modes, we're not going to do it. A classic example of how DICE have hobbled themselves is Rush. Rush we know works better 32 players than it does 64, but because Battlefield 4 is a 64 player game, they try to make 64 player Rush maps, and they really don't work that well. True, Heist and Bank Job would have the opposite problem. It works really good at 32 players, but if you stick 64 players on it, it wouldn't work. But it doesn't have to work with 64 players. If we want 64 player game modes, then we've got Battlefield 4. If we want something smaller and faster paced, then we're going to have Hardline. I think Hardline would be much more successful if they dropped 64 players entirely. Do Conquest small with 32 players, and that way they can balance their game for smaller, faster paced action. In Heist, the gun and class balance works fine. In fact, it's one of the few modes where you can play any class and have a really good role. There's plenty of up close and personal action for the Enforcer and the Mechanic. There's plenty of slightly longer range action for the Operator, and then you've got the medium range action for the Professional. And Hardline's gun model works best on these short to medium range maps. And that's why I really love the Heist mode. It's more about getting into the right positions at the right time than what weapon you're using. Movement and planning are just as important as shooting. All the action you're seeing in the background is done with the starting guns for the classes. It's even got the RO933 with the massive recoil that I absolutely hate. But on a map of this scale, that gun's massive recoil drawback doesn't really apply. You can get away with using any gun on this map and mode if you get into the right position. I played a lot of Heist as the mechanic and I never bought an SMG. I used the MP5K from start to finish. And that's one of the reasons that I loved Heist. It was just fun no matter what gun you were using or what class you were playing. And there are very few modes in a first person shooter you can say that about. So I think Visceral did a really good job on Heist and we just need more of it. Thanks for watching.